Hello and welcome to another book review. This week I'm going to be reviewing A Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin. It's the first nonfiction book that I've ever reviewed, so the format's going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to kind of talk about what went into the book as far as what the book is about. Then I'm going to kind of talk really briefly about what I didn't like about the book, and then I'm going to finish up by talking about who I think the book would be useful for, or who would enjoy the book. To start it off, Robert Zubrin wrote this book and published in 2011. And what the book is exactly what the title says. It's an argument for why humans should explore Mars. And if you've ever read something by someone and just were really blown away by how much thought and effort and time they must have put into whatever it is they are writing about, this is one of those times. It's just clearly this man's very, very intelligent. And he's been thinking about this for a long time, and he just lays out his argument, not only the why should we go to Mars, but also the how he would do it. He breaks down what the barriers that people have put up, both physically and politically, and kind of goes through those one by one and has an answer for all those critiques. He explores the history of Mars exploration from the time the planet was discovered to the current day. He goes through the different models in which we could pay for it. One's a strictly government model with one country focused on the United States, but it could be any country, paying the way to the Mars program to get humans on Mars. The other one would be a multinational collaboration between various different nations. And then finally, what he calls the Newt Gingrich model, which is actually more of the United States government puts up a certain sum of money, and companies compete essentially to achieve those goals. So it's a really, really fascinating read. He kind of lays out exactly what a human exploration to Mars would look like. He has what he calls his main point of the book is that there's a relatively cheap way to get a small crew on Mars, and what he calls Mars Direct, which is a good analogy that he uses in the book, is that similar to Lewis and Clark, the explorers who would be going to Mars would essentially be living off the land. He critiques NASA in several points of the book, and one of his main critiques of NASA is their cost accounting methods are basically the opposite of the Lewis and Clark model, which is instead of kind of living off the land, it's how much you would need to basically take the land with you. So it kind of includes all these costs for suborbital stations, the costs for all these additional things that wouldn't necessarily be necessary, especially on the first or second trip to the Red Planet. So that's really the book. I think he does an excellent job of really for something that's never happened before. He really does a good job of breaking down exactly what that would look like for a crew of 4 people to travel from the United States to Mars, from Earth to Mars, I should say. I'm sorry. And it to me was really thorough, is the best way to describe it. And if you ever wanted to give a book to someone to get excited about Mars exploration, I think this book is great for that. That's probably who I would recommend it to, is maybe a teenager or maybe a college student who is interested in science, but hasn't come across something that really spoke to them. This book really spoke to me, and it makes you think about, why we haven't, as a society, not just the U.S., but the world, hasn't taken this on. Because one of the things he kind of harps on in the book is that there are vast resources on Mars, and comparing it to the moon, which is a heavenly body we visited, it's night and day, pardon the pun, as far as the value of the moon versus the value of Mars. Mars is essentially, if you took all the land mass in the world, it would be roughly analogous to the land mass available on Mars. It has many, many, many rich minerals and metals that could be mined. He also kind of lays out why we would want to use it in terms of strategical placement if we do ever get into asteroid mining. So that's kind of more on the economic side. That's really not to mention just discovering more about whether or not life is unique to Earth. And that's really kind of his main focus on why there needs to be a human component to the exploration as opposed to just robotics. If there's any kind of critique that I have, they're fairly minor. I haven't been as impressed by a nonfiction book in a long time. So my critiques are fairly minor. One of them, there are times where he gets into the technical nuances of what he is talking about, which is maybe unescapable. But I thought there were some times where he's breaking down formulas into very finite methods. I think he could have done away with that a little bit. And then I guess the other part of it is I would have liked to have heard more on how the average person would have benefited from the travel to Mars. Because I think if you're an educated person, and he kind of makes a point too that if Mars exploration does ever happen, there's going to be a certain tipping point where people will want to immigrate to Mars. And I think that's really good for people who are squarely in the middle class and who are technically trained. There's clearly, he kind of explains why, money-wise, it may make sense to immigrate there in a similar fashion to immigrants from the old world coming to the United States, and that made a lot of sense for me. I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about why life on the planet Earth would have been better for the average person, especially if you're talking about trying to get additional funds for the program. So just to kind of wrap this up here, that's who I would recommend the book to. The what I didn't like were pretty minor points. Overall, I really recommend this to anybody who's interested in science in general, because I think it's just really good, solid piece of nonfiction writing. I thought the narrator, I listened to this on audiobook, which is why I don't have a cover today. I thought the narrator, whose name I unfortunately don't recall, he did a great job too of just going through in kind of an even tone, reading the words to a point where you were understanding things. I think he did a good job of pacing, because like I said, some of the technical writing can be a little bit confusing at points, and sometimes it's difficult to just understand exactly what's going on. But I think he did a good job of breaking down, not only Zubrin, but also the narrator did a good job of going at a pace where you could kind of keep up with the work. So overall, I recommend this book a lot. If you're interested in Mars, if you're interested in space, if you're interested in hearing critiques about NASA, if you're just interested in learning more about the ins and outs and whys of space exploration, I would recommend this to anybody who is interested in those things. Not sure exactly what I'm going to be reading next time. I'd like to thank everybody for watching the channel. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I'm also going to post my Twitter link in the posting there, so you can follow me on Twitter if you'd like to do that. So until next time, thanks everybody.